Hey Hodies, welcome back to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be doing an eye for an eye with the Nocturnal Palette from Glaminatrix. I'll explain what an eye for an eye is in just a moment, but if you are new to my channel is all about trying to love my makeup collection as it currently is, while being critical of new makeup releases, trying to unpack makeup marketing, and try to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make the best purchases for ourselves. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure you like this video because that's the best way to help me. Leaving a comment also is a great way to do that. And I'm also on patreon.com if you would like to support me there. But as always, there's no pressure to support me there. Being here, watching the video is a great way to support me. But I do want to thank my wonderful, beautiful current patrons. You are the best. And I appreciate you. So what I do in my Eye for an Eye series is I have an eyeshadow palette that's in my hands. It has to be in my hands, right? This is the concept, right? It's like, it's in my hands. What I then do is I go through all of my single eyeshadows and I try to dupe out the palette to the best of my ability. And what the hope is for me doing this activity is to quench your thirst for a release that maybe you have been lusting after for some time. Because while sometimes we can buy an eyeshadow palette and it feels like a really good purchase and it adds a lot of value to our collection, I would say that most of the time whenever I've done these eye for an eyes, I always kind of feel like I didn't really need to buy the thing. It's an activity that I am doing and you are watching, and it's supposed to be me helping you. But also duping out any palette that you're interested in before buying it is a great way to try to see if the shades are really that different in what the brand is offering you versus what you already have. And I think that's where a lot of us get sucked up. We get sucked up into the marketing and we get sucked up into a color story. Myself personally, I'm attracted to very specific color stories, and I found over time that a lot of my collection was made up of a color story kind of like that. Whether or not it was like an exact color story, it was always kind of similar, and it was like, wow, I really didn't need all of these because they all kind of serve the same purpose. That's what I'm going to be doing today. Now, I've already duped the palette out, and I did that in overhead footage. I did it a little bit differently this time. You can see me going through and swatching the process, but I don't talk through the whole process like I usually do. It's kind of gonna be like, I'll be playing music over top of it while I'm selecting the things out, and then I will tell you what I have landed on, and then I'm gonna come back here, and we're gonna apply the Nocturnal palette on one eye, and then my eyeshadow palette that I created on the other side. And we're gonna see how close I got. But as we progress through this, the point isn't that I have the exact shades. It is, if I didn't have this eyeshadow palette, would I be able to get something similar? And so it's not a matter of which side I prefer. It's a matter of, could I have done it? Or is it close enough? Could I have satisfied the want without buying? Now, I also, to keep in mind, I have a budget for review. I make some money on YouTube. I make some money through Patreon. And with that money, I buy things to review. So I wouldn't have purchased this palette if people weren't interested in hearing how I feel about it. So that's why I have this. I probably wouldn't have bought this otherwise. And I think I'm about to show you why I wouldn't have, but let's cut to the footage. All right, it's time to find things as close as possible in my makeup collection to these shades in the Nocturnal palette. So real quickly off screen, well, not off screen, I'll show it to you, but in sped up time, I'm going to grab a bunch of things that I feel like are close to what's going on in here, and then we'll come back and make the final decisions together. I'm gonna turn on a little bit of a podcast while I do this, and I'm just gonna play some nice music for you. Okay, so I in fact just made my final decisions off camera. Here's the thing, while I love duping things out, I find it very stressful to do on camera. And basically what would have happened if I was on mic and talking to you while I was doing the swatching process, I would have been like, no, 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 maybe, no, 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 maybe. So let me actually just walk you through the shades that I ended up selecting. We're gonna be putting them into this Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, but we'll do it one by one. So for a dupe for Milky Way, the closest thing I found was the shade Emboss from Cliona. It's not a perfect dupe, but it's not about perfection, it's about what got close. And then for Night Vision, I chose the shade Patina from Cliona. And then a dupe for Witching Hour. This is a shade that is from my Viseart Grand Pro 1X. I think they do have names, but I don't know what they are. So we'll just move along. The dupe I chose for Luna is the shade Grisaille from Cliona. Oh no, we gotta scooch things down here. The dupe for Fog, I actually did not have a shade very close to Fog, which I was surprised by because, you know, this falls in my little happy little zone. There might be one in the gold palette, but the gold palette, I have decided that I'm going to like use it as a palette by itself because that's my favorite way to use it. So I chose this shade. This is from the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. And again, sure, it has a name. I don't know what it is. And then a dupe for the shade Gloom. I believe that this is from, this is also from my Viseart Grand Pro 1X palette. As a dupe for Obscurity, I chose this shade. This is from the Teresa is Dead palette, and I don't know the name of it. This is the dupe I chose for the shade Murky, and this is from the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. For a dupe of Dusk, I chose the shade Engrave from Cliona. Ooh, for duping Nightfall, I chose a shade from the Viseart Grand Pro 1. And to dupe Constellation, I chose the shade Foiling from Cliona. And then to dupe the shade Shadow, I chose another shade from the Viseart Grand Pro palette. Yeah. So I would say like the key differences I see is that on this arm, this is my dupe. Everything is much more pigmented. I have much more shimmer, much more texture, which is something that I commented about the Nocturnal palette whenever I first used it. I just felt like the texture wasn't there. So you can see like what I already had. We just like have a lot more texture. But I do feel as though when I'm looking at them, we'll see on the eye how different they are, but it doesn't feel, you know, too far off, which is good, and I like that. So let's put it on the eyes. For the purposes of this video, I'm gonna probably have you zoomed in pretty close because we're gonna be all about the eyes today. But just to re-show you, here is the Nocturnal palette, and then here is my version. Look at that. Ooh, ooh. Now I get to build an eye look, and we're gonna do that together. I am gonna try to use the ones that I feel like I got the closest on, because not all of them are perfect. But I think I might actually go into the blues. I did play with some of the blues in the actual Nocturnal palette in a look I did. Where was I going? But I threw on, I went to see Shangela. And when I went to see Shangela, I was wearing the Nocturnal palette. Okay, zooming you in. So I've already prepped my eyes. I put down the Blink eyeshadow primer as a base, and then I also set that with the Pat McGrath light setting powder. So they're prepped and ready to go. We're gonna do one eye with one shade and then come back and do the other eye with the other shade, and we'll see how close we really got. But I do really think I feel inspired by the blues. The first time I played with this palette on camera, I stuck to the greens, which is like, that's where my heart is. But let's start with the blues. So I also have a color switch here, and I'll be using the same brush for both eyes. So I will use the color switch to kick off any excess powder and then move from one side to the other. So on my left eye, this is going to be the side where I put the Nocturnal palette, and then on my right side, that'll be my self-made palette. First, I'm going to go into the shade Nightfall, which is this kind of tealy color. You know what's so funny? It's like I prepped my skin for a very warm look, and then I was like, how about I do blue? How about that? And I think I'm just gonna keep it really blown out and simple today. Nothing like too extravagant. We're already going way more, like this is way more than I wanted to do with my eye look, but it's okay because I'm not going anywhere. It's not like I have anything important to do after this. The shade that I paired this up with, the shade that I felt like was the closest to it in my collection, is this light gray blue shade from my Viseart Grand Pro 1X palette. So I'm going to be applying that to my right eye. So right away you can see the pigmentation is a lot different. The Nocturnal palette has a lot more pigment. Something I really appreciate about Viseart eyeshadows though, and it's like why they're some of my favorite, is because of this buildability and control. I don't really play with a lot of colorful eyeshadows anymore, and because of this, and it's not a bad thing. Some people really love a super pigmented right off the bat situation, but it's actually not my preferred method. It's just not how I really like to apply them. So Viseart's really where it's at for me. And eyeshadow. There are some slight differences. There's definitely some more like green hue to it, and this is more of like a slate blue. But I think on the eye, they read really fairly similarly. Like I don't feel like we're too far off. Like I feel like we've landed in the same space. The next shade from the Nocturnal palette that I'm going to be using is the shade Obscurity, which kind of looks like a periwinkle shade. It reads less like periwinkle on the eye, but here we go. I'm just gonna keep that on the outer corner here. Kind of looks more like a sky blue. And then I'm going to go in with like a larger clean blending brush, and I'm just gonna blend those two together just a little bit more. I shaved my eyebrows today, so a little bit of redness is peeking through. And I'm pointing that out to you because that's not a fault of these eyeshadows. It is just where I shaved is a little bit dry, a little bit textured right now. It's a little bit irritated. So I think that's, if you're catching that, it's not to the fault of the eyeshadow. I just want you to know that going in. For my personal palette that I've made, I'm going to be using a shade from the Teresa Is Dead palette with Lethal Cosmetics. I don't know what the shade name is because it's no longer homed in that palette anymore. Again, I'm going in with a clean blending brush to just blend those two a little bit more. So far, I'm liking the way that my side is performing just a little bit better. But one of the main takeaways of that is that all of my single eyeshadow, oh my god, I have like this orange lip on and I'm like doing this really cool tone blue. I really thought I was gonna go all mustardy on my eyes, and then I was like, let's do blue. One of my favorite quality like in an eyeshadow is like incredible blendability and something that you can like layer. And I'm finding that like my Viseart shade and this Lethal shade are kind of becoming one a little bit easier than these two over here. Just a little bit. And so I'm just kind of preferring that the way my side is layering up. So the blue isn't exactly the same, but they kind of have the same depth to them. And again, it's not like we're looking for like an incredibly perfect match of these shades. It's more like, can I get the vibe? Could I have gotten this without purchasing this? I thought that the blue would read a little bit deeper. So I'm going to go into the shade Witching Hour, which is this deep purple shade in the Nocturnal palette. And I'm just gonna keep that like right on the lash line, blending up just like a little bit to lift the eye. But I don't wanna go like too far into the crease. We're just adding some depth. So as you can see, we got just like a little bit more depth there. And on the other side is yet again another shade from my Viseart Grand Pro 1. And we're just gonna do the same thing. So having applied the two shades, I feel like the Viseart shade kind of went a little bit further of a way without me having to dip back into it. And I went back into the Witching Hour shade a couple of times to get it to this, and I still feel like it's not as opaque as this one. But I do think if I went in super heavy-handed on the one from the Nocturnal palette, that it would overtake things a little bit quickly. We pretty much have dead ringers going on so far. Like it's, you know, again, the whole point is not perfection, but we have something that looks very similar to one another. Now I'm gonna play with some shimmers. I'm gonna use the shade Dusk from the Nocturnal palette. I'm gonna use it on this outer portion of the eye and then leave some space in the center part of the eye for another shimmer. I am gonna take a fluffier, clean brush and just blend that out a little bit to make it just a little more purposeful. There that is. I think the shimmers are always where you start to see like the biggest differences because they're not quite exactly the same. On my side, I'm going to put the shade Engraved from Cleona, and I'm going to use my finger again. Okay, so here's like kind of the first kind of biggest difference. And so what you can see is this shade is a little bit deeper and it's much sheerer than you think whenever you look at the palette. Like this shade over here is pretty sheer. And so while I haven't captured it exactly with the shade Engrave, they serve a very, very similar purpose on the eye, right? It's not so different. It just needs a little bit of depth. And what I could do in the future, or what I could have done, is taken the purple shade and brought it more over, and that way it would this Engrave would be laying on top of that and make it look deeper. But another really huge difference between these shadows is the Cleona shade is so much more textured and has so much more going on with it texturally, just in general, than this. It's in my opinion, more enticing. And there's a time and a place for both of these things. But if we're talking about me and my preferences with eyeshadow, and the whole point of this is to like, where do I land? Or like, in my opinion, if this is better, what was the point of the palette kind of thing? What was the point of me getting this shade into my life? Next up, we're going to take the shade Milky Way from the Nocturnal palette, and we're gonna put that on the inner third of the eye there. And in my opinion, so far as I've been playing with the Nocturnal palette, this is the shade that is the most enticing to me. And then on my personal made palette eye, I'm going to use the shade Emboss from Cleona. It's interesting because they have the same flip. They both start on the different side. So this one is pink and then you get the teal with different angles, and this one starts teal and you get the pink with the different angles. So while it's in this current angle they look very different, they're a lot more similar than you would think. It's just the way the light catches them will really show their differences. If I'm being quite honest with you, the Milky Way shade, I for the purposes of this look, I like it better, but I didn't have anything that looked exactly like this. But like, as you can see in the flip here of Emboss, it's there, but this side actually has more texture when it comes to that shade, and the Cleona shade looks a little smoother. Hopefully you can see that. It's like one of those things where it's like, oh no, multi-chromes, how am I gonna get you to see them? But I think you can see them in the certain angles. I don't think I'm gonna throw on mascara or anything. I'm just gonna zoom you out and we will continue talking about it. Honestly, do I hate the orange lipstick with this look? Not really. This is I've had some questions about this. This is Golden Rosin by Kaleidos. I don't know why I was expecting something so incredibly different. It's just kind of an orange lipstick to me. As you can see with my makeup collection, I was able to get something pretty close. You know why? Because the color story of the Nocturnal palette is something that really speaks to me on a very personal level. The first time I saw the whole palette, I was like, oh yeah, that's like 100% my jam. Mostly because I live in the space with these like murky, gurky greens, but like I have an appreciation for like, you know, blues and pinks too. A lot of the palette, I already had stuff that is very, very similar. And so duping out the palette ends up being more worthwhile to me. Why? Because of all the shades, the shade Milky Way is the one whenever I put it on, I was like, wow, that felt like an improvement, a difference, something different than what I already had. But whenever I look at the matte blue, the matte purple, all the mattes that I put on this eye, they're almost indifferent. Like they're all like they're kind of the same thing. They kind of read the same on the eye. Whenever it comes to the first shimmer shade I laid down, it was just a matter of depth, but I like the one I have on this eye better. But then the Milky Way shade is like a really kind of a show-stopping, beautiful topper shade, and I really, really like it. If I just was playing with my own collection and I was like, well, this shifts teal and so does Milky Way, I would never have known. And what I'm trying to break everyone from, which is something that I have had to take a long time to break myself from, eyeshadow can only be so nuanced and so different. And this is why I don't get swept up in eyeshadow releases as much as I once did. I have a bigger collection too, and that's something to keep in mind. If your collection is modest and you are still like building things out, if you see a color story that is like nothing like you never have seen before, and it's certainly like nothing you've ever had before, and you do take the steps to try to dupe it out, you'll find out really quickly whether or not it will add value. But you also have to consider, like, is it going to be a color story that I will actually wear? Me buying a blue eyeshadow palette isn't really going to do me any good because I don't wear a lot of blue eyeshadow. Today is a little bit different because I was like doing this activity. When I look at this palette, the blues are not what I'm like really looking at. It's those greens. It's those grungy greens that I'm very into. But I never want you to like watch my videos and feel like I'm trying to tell you to never buy something. It's just a matter of being smarter and making sure whenever you do decide to purchase something that you feel like you've done some work to figure out that that is truly going to be the best for you. It's about slowing down. It's about not pulling the trigger so quickly, and doing activities like this really will slow you down, but also really show you and get you to appreciate eyeshadows that maybe you haven't spent that much time with. And the reason you're attracted to that palette is because you've already bought those things and you're like, I really like those. And you thought you really liked those, but maybe you've never played with them. Always just trying to provide some perspective, you know? And if you end up making a purchase and it ends up being really good for you, we're just trying to prevent those purchases where it gets into your house and you look at it and you're like, oh, I already have this 10 times over. I will never use this color story. I fell a lot into the trap where it would be like, I'm gonna buy this color story and I'm gonna use it all the time. But it's not something that I really liked. I'm gonna stop waxing poetically. I'm gonna leave you alone. But I think I did a pretty great job duping the vibes of this eyeshadow palette and, you know, getting as close as I could with what I already had. I know that the Nocturnal Palette's almost sold out. They don't have that many units of this left, and there might not even be any left by the time that I post this video. But even then, if you don't end up having this eyeshadow palette, it's not going to be the death of you. No matter how beautiful these eyeshadows are, you not owning this is not going to like be a make or break deal. I'm still playing with it. I'm still testing it out. Like this is not my final review. This actually isn't a review of the eyeshadow palette at all. It's just an activity. If you are new to the channel and you made it all the way to the end and you enjoyed today's video, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure you like this video before you leave it. As I said earlier, it's one of the best ways that you can support a creator, and also leave a comment down below. What eyeshadow palettes do you have your eyes on? Have you done an eye for an eye to see if you already have something in your collection like that? I mean, it's more of like a duping the vibes if you do it before you buy it. Mine's like more of a retroactive duping the vibes, but have you already duped the vibes? What's inspiring you right now? Thank you again to all of my wonderful patrons. But if you want to become a patron, you can absolutely can, but again, there's no pressure to. And that's that. That's a wrap, dolls. We're on the other side here. I appreciate you all so much. Remember to follow your haute, and you will find me. I appreciate you so much. Bye-bye.